So, welcome to another week of playing solo jazz piano. And this time I have a really nice announcement to make. The state of Brandenburg, my home state, has given out a grant for me to continue this series, bringing this to you. And I'm very happy for that, especially in this time where it's really hard to make a living as a musician, that the state that I live in has taken it upon itself to see artists through. And so here's a shout out to Brandenburg and its government. Thank you very much. So, as we said the last time, we wanted to talk about stride piano today. Now, what is stride piano? Stride piano is actually an Humpa bass line that you know from marches or ragtime. You see what I mean? And in the first ragtimes, like Scott Joplin and these people, they really played just that in the left hand, and their main innovation compared to the old marches and polkas was just a syncopated right hand. So they would go. Very simplified, of course. Scott Joplin's arrangement was a little bit more complicated, but I don't want to get into that here because it's actually not the subject of today's lesson. Now, we're becoming interested in stride piano as the style entered the 1920s. And there were people coming along like James P. Johnson, Fats Waller, Willie the Lion Smith. And what they did, first of all, they changed the right hand phrasing from straight eighth notes like you have in ragtime to swing eighth notes. And so if we played that Scott Joplin tune, The Entertainer, in that manner, you would end up with. Now, of course, they also added improv in the right hand, so they didn't stick to the melodies, to fixed melodies, quite as much as the old ragtime pianists. Now, the other innovation that the 1920s New York Harlem stride pianists came up with was in the left hand. So they didn't use the simple bass line major or minor chord scheme anymore. But they made the chord a little bit more complicated and made it a regular jazz 3-part, 4-part voicing, and made the bass note into a shell voicing, as we discussed in last week's lesson. And the shell voicing then doesn't have to be as deep as that bass note in order to sound full. So you won't see any really wide striding like this with Harlem stride piano, but you keep it narrower, and because you're now playing those full shell voicings, you can make the stride a little bit smaller and still sound full. and so forth. Now you have a setup where basically there's a chord on any of the 4 accounts in the bar. And it's going to sound nice and full. Of course, it still has some sort of Humpa effect, but it's not nearly as March-like as we had it before with just one bass note, especially if you're rolling the 10th or any other interval. Then you get a do-doom, chak, just like the right cymbal pattern the swing drummers played. And you're translating this all nicely into the left hand and making it a very smooth pattern to work with. Now let's use this on a tune like, let's pick What a Difference a Day Made. Nice, huh? Gives you a really big landscape of accompaniment that you can work nicely with a right hand. Totally unrestricted of range, and one melody line is essentially enough. The left hand is doing everything else. Good. Now, how do you still maintain orientation on the keyboard while you're doing that? I have a neat little trick that I use often. When I play a Shell-Voicing, I have a lower and an upper note, and I use that upper note where my thumb used to be my pinky moves. You get the idea. So, plus that middle note that's played on all the 4 beats, it adds a nice sense of continuity. So that's a good habit to develop. It can also be a little bit lower. You play it like here. Might even be preferable. Now the nice thing about that pattern, now that it's so smooth, is we can even make it less umpa sounding by inverting it. Like not have the bass note on 1 and 3 and the chord on 2 and 4 only, but we mix it up and play like. And back to the old pattern. And then maybe. You get that, right? So you're taking a little bit of regularity away and creating a whole more smooth tapestry to work with. Now, a good idea is also to change up the voicings every half measure. As you've noticed, I played a lot of root fifth alternating bass lines. Fifth, root, fifth, root, 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 fifth, root, fifth, root, right? But you can also, if your chord rings for a bar or more, you can also modify the top note, like I like to do. So I'm staying in the vicinity of those notes, play neighboring tones, and give a little bit more independent melody to that middle line that always is ringing. So this is something that you can do to add some variety, but I would say later on when you're more secure at this type of piano playing. Now there's also whole bar transitions that you can play with bass lines only. Like you're going from a 1 to a 4. Then you could go, I'm doing it in C major now. I'm on the 1, now I'm going, walking up to the 4. And then go back down because it gets a little high up there. So I just walked a 10th right up. And there I am. You can also, of course, walk up to a 5th. Or you can walk down. Gets a little low down there. Right? You can do the same thing also with the 7th. Right? Now a nice way to use those 10th or 7th is on the bridge of tunes that go from the 4 to the 2. Like you know the kind, honeysuckle rose type bridge. You will go. transition, transition, right? You could do the same thing also with the tenths. So, that about covers it all, what you can do with these Shell-Voicings down there. Another nice thing you can do phrasing-wise is to do nice accents in between there. Like a drummer would do. A little note still on pedaling. You shouldn't pedal too much. You can pedal quarter notes to make it real smooth. But by no means let it hang over too much, or else you get a muddy sound. And when you play without the pedal, don't play the notes too short. That sounds corny, right? So, but you keep the notes well held, but you leave a little bit of space. And so on. So, this brings us to the end of today's lesson. And so just practice this on a lot of different tunes that you may have in mind. Actually, it works really well with slow swing stuff. The faster stuff is not so good with it, because then you get easily, you get back into this oompa kind of sound that you don't necessarily want. But 120 BPM or slower is perfect for that. Now, next week, we're going to change things up a little bit. We're not going to do any more left hand stuff, but we're going to have to take a look at the right hand. Because in our setting, where we're without a bass player, without a drummer, we're suggesting the entire rhythm ourselves. And so it's crucially important what our right hand is doing, what time feel it implies, and what the micro-timing relationship to the left hand is. So next week we'll devote the lesson to analyzing that, and I'll show you a few strategies that you can use to get your right hand phrasing perfectly in sync, or out of sync as the case may be, with the left hand. So, thank you for listening, have fun, happy practicing, and see you next week.